Welcome to the Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Stuart Mandel, joined as always by my colleagues Ralph Russo and Bruce Feldman for our Week 8 reaction show, guys. There's a lot to get to. We had all these, we had, I think, 4 top 10 teams lose and a lot of other upsets as well. I think some more coaches are in trouble. We're going to get to our shout-outs toward the end of the show. I might talk a little bit about my UNC football in-person experience. But first, let's get right to it. We have Miami, the number 2 team in the country, lost to Louisville. Texas Tech, who we thought was the dominant team in the Big 12 so far, loses to ASU. LSU goes down at Vandy. And then this is not an upset, but Georgia hands Ole Miss its first loss. Ralph, I'm going to start with you. Out of those 4 outcomes, which one was the most surprising to you?
I don't know most surprising, but I think most significant was Texas Tech losing, because I think we had all been ready to crown the Red Raiders and their portal all-star roster as the beast of the Big 12, and they're just going to romp their way to a championship. And last year's Big 12 champion decided, we're going to have a say in this too. Sam Leavitt was great, leading a comeback. Frankly, Arizona State really let Texas Tech hang around in that game. So I think it's significant in that it opens up the Big 12 race. And I think it's significant because I think we need to start having a conversation about what Texas Tech is doing at quarterback and whether that, because I think they're both pretty good players, but I don't know if either of them, Bruce, is like a great player. So yeah, there was a lot going on this weekend, but that was the one in particular that stood out to me, with a lot of games that stood out.
Yeah, on Friday night on our show at Fox, I know Mike Hill had asked me, should Texas Tech be on upset alert? And I was like, they're in the Big 12. Everybody needs to be on upset alert in the Big 12 because it's a crazy conference. And obviously having Sam Leavitt back, he didn't play the week before at ASU, and they got blown out. And he played, and as you said, he just has this captain comeback vibe about it. And it really carries with what Kenny Dillingham has built there. It's impressive. Obviously, it helps to have Jordan Hudson, who, by the way, was playing through a Jordan Tyson.
Jordan Tyson.
There's a phrase.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? I think I know where that came from.
Look, he's a terrific receiver. Playing through a hamstring injury in that game was impressive. I'll say this on the quarterback front in Lubbock. So I think we got a little bit of a false sense of Will Hammond, who was a big recruit for Tech even before all the portal talk. And he is a very dynamic athlete. He looked outstanding the first really time we all saw him when he was in a tough environment at Utah. He stepped in, played nearly flawlessly, I thought. He hasn't looked as good since then. I credit some of that certainly to ASU. But as you said, Ralph, this was it was closer than it felt for most of the night. I sit here and look at Texas Tech because it is such I still think they're the best team in the Big 12. I don't know how much this, Baron Morton has thrown over 1,000 passes in college. Will Hammond's thrown about 100. So I think that experience is not an insignificant detail. I would guess they just have a more steadying vibe around them with Baron Morton than they do with Hammond. So, when they get him back, which we think will be soon, I think that would probably bode well for them. I'm not writing them off. In terms of big picture, Stu, of all the unbeatens that went down, who do you think is all right, this one, I don't want to say it was fluky, but it was the best chance to bounce back where it didn't really change your opinion of them much?
Yeah, and I'm going to say Miami for that. And part of it, though, is the problem for Texas Tech is they could turn around, run the table, and still miss the ACC championship game. I'm sorry, the Big 12 championship game, just because of all the crazy tiebreakers. Right now, tied for first in the Big 12. Who saw this coming? BYU and Cincinnati at 4-0, right? So Texas Tech doesn't control its destiny. And Miami, after losing to Louisville, does not control its ACC title destiny, but I don't know that it matters because their resume is going to put them in great shape to make the playoff, frankly, even at 10-2. Nobody in the Big 12, Texas Tech or anybody else has a non-conference win over a team like Notre Dame, right? Miami also beat USF, who's currently a top 25 team and might win that conference. So they've given themselves more margin for error. Now, if you want to say, I don't know, Carson Beck threw 4 interceptions, I think they're in trouble. I don't know if he can get it done. Yeah, that's a conversation to be had.
Can we have that conversation right here? Because that's kind of where I wanted to go. So
yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on, like, was that a one-off or is this going to be a problem?
So when he was at Georgia, he had I think 3 games last year where he threw 3 picks, right? And you could dismiss that as much as you want for a variety of reasons. The other night was I thought concerning because the first 2 balls downfield, it was like, okay, if you have Calvin Johnson, maybe you put that ball up like that and you figure your guys are just better than everybody else. And he got away with one of those against Notre Dame. CJ Daniels made a really good play for a touchdown catch. But when I sit there and watch him, I don't want to say it felt like Malachi Toney versus Louisville, but it was like, if we don't have Malachi Toney, we're getting blown out of this game. And he rallied them, and I thought he was by far Miami's best offensive player. I don't know how much, if I was a Miami fan, I would sweat that they didn't look as good in the trenches. I'll give a lot of credit to Jeff Brom and Louisville. And by the way, they do have really good skill talent. They have, an elite receiver, an elite running back, and Miller Moss has actually played a lot of football. And you got arguably as good a play caller as there is in the country in Jeff Brom. And they are a dangerous team when they get up for teams. You look, they're like 4-4 against top 5 opponents. That's an insanely good resume, especially for a guy who's not coaching at Blue Bloods. But on the issue of Carson Beck, Ralph, it's funny. I don't want to pull us into Georgia just yet, but a lot of Georgia people were like, Gunnar Stockton's going to be fine. They weren't that sad to see Carson Beck go. I think if Miami side, you saw him like, oh, Shannon Dawson was great with Cam Ward last year, and they got a really good offensive line, and this is going to fit. What do you think? This was like, man, I don't know about Carson Beck. I don't know if he's good enough to lead Miami. I think they can still get to the playoff, but good enough to make a title run.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So every question about who can win a national title needs to be framed within the context of the teams aren't as good this year, right? The teams in general are just not as good this year. There are like maybe Ohio State is a cut above everybody else, but like we're not dealing with 2021 Georgia, 2018 or 17 Alabama, Clemson era teams. Like the world is flattening. So is Carson Beck good enough to win a championship at Miami? Probably. I was a little worried. Like the one glaring problem with Miami going into that game to me was they don't create a lot of big plays unless it's Malachi Toney, right? They're also, it's not just that they have a Carson Beck problem. I think they generally have a receiver problem because they have 2. They have Toney and they have Daniels, and that's it. And now they
do have a good tight end though. I think
they don't throw the ball to him all that much, and they also seemingly have a running back problem now because they're getting hurt, right? Because they don't seem to be like healthy all the time between
Jordan Lyle was hurt for the first month.
Yeah, Fletcher, Lyle, and Brown. So yeah, I don't know. Like I'm not overly worried about Miami in terms of like you're right. In fact, in some ways, Miami losing a game and because of these ridiculous supersized conferences and their like imbalanced schedule, like Miami missing the ACC title game at 11-1 might be a good thing for the ACC because it could get them 2 teams in. I would be a little concerned, Stu, about just assuming Miami is in at 10-2 because I do think there could be a log jam of 10-2, maybe even 9-3. That's what I wrote about in my column today about like we better brace for a 9-3 team to get in this thing because if you look at the projections, there's not a lot of teams that are projected to win 10 games, Stu.
That's why I said I think they might be in good shape even at 10-2 because I just think this field.
It's a fair point.
There's going to be more chaos. I mean, think about last year. Miami almost made it at 10-2. And like I said, they didn't have a Notre Dame win on that. I don't even think they had a USF win on that resume. I think we forget I think when we get caught up in it, right, in midstream, and this happened even, 14. It's like, oh, that was a really bad loss. They're in trouble. And you forget that by the end of the season, like Louisville's really good. That might not even really, affect our perception of them at all. But also, the kind of teams that will be in contention for that last at-large spot, none of them are going to be have particularly impressive resumes. I think we should get into the Georgia Ole Miss game, and then we're going to get to LSU Vandy.
Yeah, it was a huge day in the SEC, man. Like what a
like the biggest day ever, because there were
Greg
eight.
Sankey's
There were
dream.
8 games. I don't know if they've ever had 8 where they're all playing like that. So
never. And had 8 where they're all playing. Nope.
And I had inevitably, right, in final thoughts, I get comments of you're SEC bias. You read all about the SEC and not about the Big Ten. I'm like, guys, look at look at their schedules yesterday. I mean, am I supposed to be getting caught up in Oregon, Rutgers, and Ohio State, Wisconsin when you got these bangers back to back to back in the SEC? Anyway,
the other thing, can I throw this in about the SEC for a second? 8 games, 6 decided by 1 score. By 1 possession, 2 overtime games, and my old friend Josh DeBow from AP tweeted a stat on top of my stat to go with it, that the average margin of victory or margin in SEC games right now is, I believe, the lowest it's been since like 2003. The level of competitiveness now in the SEC is crazy. It feels like the NFL.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that those teams are great, right? I mean,
I think it means, Stu, I think it means that they aren't great. I think what we're seeing is the parity of the portal. More people have now money to spend, as opposed to maybe, we're going to get this player under the table back in the day, or those kinds of things. Right now, I mean, look at Georgia. Georgia got... I mean, the only game I can remember since Georgia's been very good under Kirby Smart, where it felt like that, was the Rose Bowl against Baker Mayfield, when it was a wild back and forth game. Now, Baker Mayfield was a truly elite quarterback in college, playing in a really high-powered offense. They're not seeing, except for 2019 LSU, you don't see many offenses that were anywhere near that good. I mean, Ole Miss is a pretty good offense. It's not that good. And I think we saw until the fourth quarter, Georgia's defense was just getting abused. Even with them shutting down Trinidad Chambliss in the fourth quarter, he was 1 for 10 on passes in the fourth quarter, and they had almost no yardage. They still didn't have a sack in the whole game, which is really kind of puzzling. And I think the larger point of this, guys, is that even the best teams in the SEC, whether it is A&M, whether it is certainly Georgia, Alabama, can they run the ball? Are we a big believer in their defense? Vanderbilt, I think we have to actually put them in the best teams in the SEC. They all have sizable flaws, not just little flaws, which we used to have before. And I think that is different just because the depth issues, and we see it a lot. But I think the area where it's the most glaring to me is Georgia. Again, I don't think Georgia is a team that can't win the national title, but this is not the team or not the program that beat A&M beat TCU by 60 in the title game and just bullied everybody. And I don't know, coming out of that, I think I expected them to beat Ole Miss at home, certainly. I mean, who do you have the most confidence in the SEC right now?
I feel like we go through this every week, and I'm still sticking with the team that just beat 4 straight ranked teams. We need to get past this whole they lost to Florida State. I don't know what that was. That was crazy. It doesn't matter.
Total mirage.
Yeah, it was just a mirage. One of the things I'm writing about today in my poll story is like it takes me back to when Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech early in the season in 2014, and people were like, "Well, that team can't possibly play for a national championship," which essentially was lying to yourself as you watch that team run through the rest of its schedule and like not admit that like, oh, that's one of the best teams in the country. Like Alabama to me is the best team in the SEC, but with caution, because as you said, and coming back to the larger discussion about what's going on across the country, these are not Alabama team. Alabama used to go and beat the number 15 team in the country 38-7, right? And Georgia was doing that too. Remember, there was a big ranked Georgia Arkansas game, and Georgia was winning 21-0 in the first 7 minutes. Right? That has been compacted now in the SEC, Stu. But I also will say this: the SEC has the most good teams. Like you go down to number 8, 9, 10 in the SEC, and that's a legit good team, and that's not the case in the other conferences, Stu.
Yeah, and because of that, right, I think it's very we're defaulting to Ohio State, right? They're by far the best team so far. They haven't really been touched, and then it's starting to. But then you look at, like you just said, Alabama's beaten 4 straight top 25 teams without a bye week, no less. So if they have flaws, like they're going to be on display. Georgia has also played several good teams, and their flaws have been on display. And it's like, well, have you looked at how Ohio State's schedule is starting to kind of evaporate, right? Obviously, Texas is not what people thought they were going to be. I do think it was a good win to go into Washington and beat them, but, Washington's not that great. Credit to Minnesota for beating Nebraska. Illinois, Wisconsin's terrible. And now the game that was supposed to be their big marquee opponent, Penn State, is not. So, like, I'm a little... Yes, I agree that none of these teams, certainly none of these SEC teams are, 2015-ish Alabama or 2022-ish Georgia. Agreed. But I would also caution people into thinking that means that the top teams in the Big Ten are better than them. I just don't think those teams have. Obviously, Indiana impressed us against Oregon, but like Ohio State in particular just hasn't been tested like some of these top SEC teams have.
Bruce, when you watch Ohio State, because when I was watching a little bit of them yesterday, and again, you'd only want to watch them for so long because, like, all right, well, Carnell Tate, he's awesome. All right, it's kind of fun to watch them. By the way, I think they have the best 2 receivers in the country because I think Tate might be number 2 behind Jeremiyah Smith. But you do start looking to try to discern, like, what am I watching here, and look with a critical eye. Like, they're not running the ball great. So I do worry about that. Their special teams are kind of icky. So you almost have to watch Ohio State with a like, where are the flaws that could be a problem later on, because they're not going to be a problem immediately.
Yeah, I think the thing, and Stu touched on this a minute ago, where I do give them a lot of credit for, was derailing Washington's offense up in Seattle. Like Damon Williams is a dynamic dual threat quarterback. Jonah Coleman's one of the best running backs in the country. They have pretty good skill at receiver. Now their offensive line isn't great, and now it's really banged up. Like, Michigan whipped them pretty good yesterday in Ann Arbor. But I think the point that I would be, if I was and I don't know if this shows up. Maybe it shows up in Ann Arbor at the end of the year, because obviously we know all bets are off in that rivalry at this point. But the only thing I would be, if I was an Ohio State fan, I'd be a little leery of is the run game. They had 2 phenomenal running backs last year who were both in the NFL. I think their run game scheme was probably a little saltier than maybe it's going to be now, because that's honestly what the offensive coordinator back then, that's Chip Kelly's strength. And, I think it's still something that, a collection of people, led by Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, are going to try to figure out as they, get into better teams. But the passing game, Stu, I think, I don't want to say Julian Sayin should win the Heisman, because as Ralph said, and we all agree with it, he has the best group of receivers. But I do get the sense that Ohio State's passing game, because Julian Sayin is more accurate, gets the ball out quicker, than Will Howard did. He's not quite the runner, and that's another piece of the run game, to be honest. You had the 2 running backs and I don't think people realize how big Will Howard is, or a lot of people don't. Like, he was a strong, tough runner. You saw that more when he was in the Big 12, certainly, but that was another element. If we're looking for, flaws on Ohio State, that would be the one I'd probably be most worried about. But coming out of this, if we get into this discussion about the top of the Big Ten versus the top of the SEC, I don't know. I feel like right now there's 3 teams I have a decent amount of confidence in the Big Ten that I think they could go out and win a playoff game if they were up against a legit top, 15 team, and that's certainly Ohio State, that's Indiana, and that's Oregon. After that, it feels like a pretty steep drop off right now. I mean, I just don't, I could talk myself into, oh, Michigan's really young, and by the end of the year, they could be dangerous or whatever, because I watched that game, but we're only a week beyond them getting bullied at USC. And maybe, I don't know, Stu, if you have a feel for, anybody else can threaten the top part of the Big Ten. It's just way different than it feels like the SEC is now.
No, in fact, I think that conference is probably heading toward just 3 playoff teams, which I didn't mean to get us onto a tangent into Ohio State and their flaws and the Big Ten and whatnot, but I think that's the fundamental difference between those 2 leagues. The Big Ten is so top heavy. And by the way, there were years in the past when you could say that about the SEC, when it was like Alabama, Georgia, and then everybody else. But that is clearly not the case right now. And by the way, perhaps the best personification of that is Vandy is good. Okay. We probably shouldn't have to even say that anymore, but watching the Vandy LSU game, you're just like, wow, their offense is kind of a thing of beauty. I mean, Pavia, and it's not just Pavia. He's got great players around him. You say, well, I know we're going to talk LSU here in a second, but like, nobody's complained about their defense to this point in the season. Vandy had a lot of success against them. So obviously they lost to Bama already. So that kind of puts them in a hole in terms of getting to the SEC title game necessarily. But Vandy could make the playoff. Like, we need to talk about that as a serious possibility. LSU, on the other hand, Ralph, how are you feeling about their diminishing hopes?
Well, I would say I didn't rank LSU this week in my top 25. Maybe that was a little harsh, but it's just kind of light there, on that resume over there. And yeah, so then of course, once you do that, so you have a 5-2 LSU, you look at their remaining schedule with A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, a couple of other games in there.
Arkansas could get them, by the way. Bobby Petrino, for
very
as
good
nut
offense.
as
Yeah. I mean, Arkansas is like legitimately one of the best offenses in the country.
They're dangerous.
One of the worst defenses in the country. They are that team. They are this team. Like, we are up here in one thing and we are down here in the other thing. So then you have the Brian Kelly discussion, and we're going to get into another coach who's got a serious discussion about what his future is going to look like. I don't know if we're into the Brian Kelly gets fired discussion with a $60 million buyout. And I do think LSU is good enough to win a couple of these games down the stretch. But I would also say, like, LSU wasn't really paying for 8-4 and out of the playoff. Again, it might be too expensive for LSU, Bruce, to fire Brian Kelly, but there's a lot of angst around there right now because this is not what they signed up for.
No, and look, as somebody who had LSU in my bracket at the start of the season, it's been a massive disappointing season. They feel worse than the record is. Honestly, their best win is against a Clemson team that's 3-4. Like, I think they have been down ever since then. Like, quite honestly, yesterday, I think that was Nussmeier's best game of the season. He actually played really, really well. There was a lot of pressure. He made a lot of really good throws. It was the kind of stuff where I think you see why NFL scouts really like him. But the rest of it, obviously, they didn't have Whit Weeks, but Pavia was phenomenal. I mean, if if you gave me a Heisman ballot right now, I'd put Pavia number one. I mean, I just think it is again,
But you
and
do
not
have
to,
a Heisman ballot. Who are
yeah,
you
but I'm
voting
not.
for
I'm
in a
not
straw
sending.
poll?
I'm not
In
sending it
the
right.
athletic Heisman straw poll, who did you vote?
Uh, I would vote Pavia number one. I would vote some combination of this three: Pavia, and then I don't know whether it's Simpson or Mendoza. Probably Simpson, then Mendoza, because I feel like Mendoza played well at Oregon, but I feel like Simpson has just almost carried that offense. But if you look at what's going on with LSU, we've talked about this a lot. You know, this was like much less the national title year. It's you got to make the playoff if you're Brian Kelly. I don't know how the dynamics work on this front at LSU, whether who's more in danger of losing their job first, Brian Kelly or Scott Woodward, his AD, who made a big, bold bet to go bring Brian Kelly from the Midwest down to LSU. Remember, they triple their NIL budget this year on this team. It does not look like it at all. Like it, I feel like if they played Vandy 10 times, I feel like they'd lose 7 of them. At least that's the way it looked. Again, I don't know. I mean, Stu, if you are an LSU fan right now, what again, they could go 2-3. They might go 4-1. I doubt it down the stretch. But 7-5, 8-4 looks very realistic. It's year 4. If you're an LSU fan, what do you want to see happen there?
I think it's easy to kind of sit here now and start, doom and gloom. But the whole perception of LSU will be decided in the next 2 weeks or next 2 games, right? If LSU beats either number, whatever top, they're both in the top 5, right? They're going to play A&M and they're going to play Alabama, who are both going to be in the top 5. And if they beat one of them, you're going to
Do you think
say,
they can? You
"Oh,
think they can
there it
make the
is."
playoff with that?
No,
Depends on what they do.
Well,
Depends on what they do from there.
but
But
if
I'm
they win
saying,
one of those games, you just completely change the trajectory of the season.
yeah.
What have you seen this year that makes you guys think they're going to do that?
I don't think they're going to do it. But
I mean,
it's
we
the
say
SEC.
that every week, though, right? Like,
right.
this is the danger of, or not the danger, but like, we get to a point in the season, we start playing out the schedule, and we just assume every game's going to go to script. I mean, it wouldn't. I mean, it's not. If you tell me right now, you know what's going to happen? LSU at home is going to beat A&M. I would say that's not that crazy. I mean, it's the SEC.
A&M just had all they could handle yesterday.
Yeah, it's not even anything against A&M. I think A&M is really good, but it's really hard to win every week in that conference. So the point is, if they pull one of those 2 off, first of all, their playoff hopes are right back on the table. Ralph, you suggested earlier there could be a 9-3 team this year. You know how you do that? By beating a top 5 team along the way. And then, that takes some heat off. At least it puts the Brian Kelly conversation off until we see how the rest of the season goes. If they lose both of those games, right, and now they are at best 8-4, that honestly is hard for me to see him come back from. Now, Bruce, you say they could fire Scott Woodward first, but then who decides Brian Kelly's fate?
Yeah, but it's a $60 million. What's going to decide Brian Kelly's
we're done.
fate is can somebody? But I also don't know if there's mitigation in this one.
I don't want to ever have a will they pay the buyout conversation again. Now that Penn State set that precedent, no fan base is going to say, like, especially at LSU.
And by the way, let's just remind
we
you
don't
guys,
have the money.
Just to remind you guys, Penn State hasn't won a national title in like 40 years. LSU has won 3 national titles with 3 different coaches before Brian Kelly. To me, the bar is, I get why Penn State fans and Penn State administration was really frustrated. The bar at LSU is insanely high. And I use the word insanely specifically. It is insanely high.
Okay, I was going to save this for the Norvell conversation because clearly we're going to get to that. But in between, we just want something needs to change here. Either the contracts need to change, right? Where they're not so long, they're not for so much money, there's not for such big buyouts. Either the standard of what a success needs to change, because now the SEC, especially in the SEC, because that's a monster. Like, you're just not going through like an 8-4 season in the SEC. Again, it's becoming like the NFL. An 8-4 season is really not that bad. This is no longer the days where LSU could just push around Ole Miss and Mississippi State.
But it's easier to get in the playoff, Ralph, than it was when it was 4 teams.
No, it's not easier because you have Oklahoma. No, it's not, because you have
there are 12
Oklahoma
teams,
and
Ralph.
But it's not.
But you don't play Oklahoma and Texas. You don't play all those teams.
Yes, they do.
12
They play Oklahoma.
But you're not playing. But you're not playing all of them, Ralph.
Do I need to step in and separate you guys?
By numbers, it is sort of easier, but it's not easier because the conference is loaded. Regardless, you either have to change your expectations, change the contracts, and there was another one, but now I've gotten all riled up and I can't remember it. So what we are judging this by 2021 or 2 standards, and something needs to change going forward here. Not for us, but for like these schools. They just need to say, like, okay, we're going to start giving you NFL level type of contracts. 4 or 5 years, that's about it. And we're going to give you 3 or 4, and then we're going to judge you over 3 or 4 years. You can't give a guy a 10-year contract with the idea that, well, we'll see what happens after 4 years. That's insane. That's insane.
But that's what this business is. You're preaching sanity to lunatics.
But it needs
There's nothing rational about college football.
But Ralph, it's not going to change. Like, I actually agree with you.
But the landscape has changed. So now is the inflection point where people need, because this isn't even like a Franklin situation where, like, hey, he's been there 11 years. That marriage is sort of like worn out here. They could both use a change. Like, you can't give a guy a 10-year contract and say, well, we'll see what happens in 4 years. And he's got like a 65% winning percentage and we're going to fire him. It's banana pants.
Well, I 1,000% agree with you, especially about the SEC being so much harder now. Not harder, but like there's just too many good. Well, it's hard. It's not even necessarily that it's harder. It's that there are now too many teams whose fans expect them to go 10-2 every year, right? Like, there are more of those kind of teams with Oklahoma and Texas coming in than it's mathematically possible, right? Somebody's going to go 7-5. Somebody's going to have a losing record. Out of that, I would say it's about 8 programs where they feel. I mean, look at Florida right now. The fans were booing Billy Napier during a win. They were chanting "Fire Billy," and they were winning at the time. Right now, I get it's 3-4. It's not like this is. We can compare that to Brian Kelly, but so what you said sounds amazing. How do we go around the country and tell college football fans, guys, let's have a rational conversation here, right? Guys, LSU fans, I know we've won 3 national championships under the last 3 coaches, but times have changed.
Listen to the guy who went to Fordham in New York. Listen to the guy who went to Fordham in New York.
And so, because of now when we had Greg Byrne on here last week, we talked to him about this very topic about why do you guys do these insane buyouts? Is this ever going to change? And literally, we recorded that on Tuesday. And was it later that afternoon that Indiana announced the $93 million contract for Curt Cignetti?
Right.
Fully guaranteed. And it's like, okay, this is never going to change, right? So LSU's going to, if they fire BK and they pay him all that money, they're then going to turn around and hire somebody else and give him a 80-90% guaranteed enormous contract. I think what they need to do, the schools need to do, and I wrote this last week, is start going to a more incentive-driven structure. Instead of saying you're going to pay you this and you're going to get it all no matter how you do, right? Curt Cignetti could go 0-12 for the rest of the time. He's going to make $93 million. It should be more, okay, here's your base salary. This is what you're going to make. If you take us to the national championship or the play, whatever, you're going to make way more than even that, right? You're going to make more money than any coach has ever made because we can justify that. But if you suck, it's going to be a lot cheaper for us to fire you, right? High risk, high reward,
and shorter deals. And just make them 5 years.
But they're not. But what coach is going to agree to that? Yeah.
Nobody wants to hire either one of you as an agent, by the way.
No, well, there is that. The other thing is too, though, the game has really changed when Vandy can get in the game. That's what I'm saying. Like now, because of the earth flattening, and we talk about NIL and investment and this and that and the other thing, like Vandy's in the game, Missouri's in the game, Ole Miss is very much in the game. That was not the SEC 10 years ago. Those teams would occasionally poke their heads up and say, hey, we're here for a year, and Dak Prescott would leave and Mississippi State would go back to being irrelevant. These schools are now in the game, and it makes it really, really tough for it just flattens the curve in the SEC. You want to talk about USC? We've been trying to get to USC Notre Dame for 5 minutes, Stu. You want to talk about USC?
Okay,
Notre
but
Dame?
I just had a quick thought, and then we'll do that.
Okay.
You said Ole Miss is very much in the game, but what if isn't it possible Vandy could make the playoff before Lane Kiffin at this point? Like, it would be, yes, Ole Miss. I'm saying Ole Miss is in the game because they're getting the roster, but like this yesterday was just another reminder that Lane is kind of like James Franklin, but more lovable. Like, he never wins these kind of games. He does the funny stuff. Like I mean, it was great what he did going up.
He did win one last year. He did win one last year, by the way.
He
finally won one last year. Yeah. All right, USC Notre Dame. You know what's got to be fun, Bruce, is that if you're a Notre Dame fan and I mean, they've won a lot of games, don't get me wrong, Brian Kelly and whatnot, but like, it's been a whole lot of like Ian Book is our quarterback. Riley Leonard is our quarterback. We're going to run the ball and maybe win 17-10, right? You watch that game yesterday and it's just like, it's like early 2010s Oregon in Notre Dame uniforms. There goes Jeremiyah Love. There goes Jadarian Price. They're one of the most explosive teams in the country all of a sudden, Bruce. Now, I don't know how we feel about their defense at this point, but me personally, I think they're going to the playoff. What about you? What about you?
Too. I think so too. I feel like a lot of what has changed for them is these are the best running backs they have had. I mean, I remember I asked like Brady Quinn, who did you have or whatever, it's like Darius Walker, like they had pretty good running backs. Jeremiyah Love to me is a better, and they had Kyron Williams a few years ago, who is a terrific all-around back, like great blocker, good receiver, really good runner, was not as dynamic as Jeremiyah Love. I hate to put this out there because now he's probably the best running back in the NFL and an MVP guy. Jeremiyah Love reminds me a lot of Bijan Robinson. Like, he is so dynamic. He is really physical. And the second, I don't want to say this is quite what Ohio State has with Carnell Tate being the other guy. Jadarian Price is probably one of the top 5 running backs in the country. They have 2 of them in a system like, not to go back to LSU for a second, but like Mike Denbrock is really good offensive coordinator. And he's got now a quarterback who's probably the best quarterback they've had since Brady Quinn, at least the most talented since Brady. And so you have that with 2 elite running backs and a physical style. Like, they just beat up on USC last week. And I wouldn't worry that much about the Notre Dame defense because Jaden Miles is a really good quarterback, and they have 2 really dangerous receivers, obviously Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and a pretty good tight end, but they are banged up at running back. And I thought if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would have loved every moment of that, especially the rain, because it was like, okay, you want to end the rivalry, you want to, not play us all the time or whatever direction this is going to go. It's like, we're going to punch you in the mouth for that. And I feel like they care about the rivalry. I'm with you, Stu. I think they're a playoff team. I would, pivot to this, Ralph. Like, last year, they played for the national title with a really good running quarterback. Obviously, they had the same running backs. I feel like there's a different dimension now because CJ Carr, younger, but is a more of a threat downfield to stretch people out. It's probably too soon to say, are they better than the team that made it to the national title game? But it feels like they are trending in the right direction and picking up momentum after those first 2 losses. Like, do you think, Ralph, that this team can go further, or can?
There's only one step to go further.
Yeah, there's only one step to go further. It is just such a different team, though, because this is definitely an offense first team. Yeah, like I know their defense has played better the last couple of weeks, but it ain't what it was the last couple of years, right? It wasn't. They were sort of suffocating and almost impossible to pass against. Though Leonard Moore is still very good. Leonard Moore is still really, really good, and they've got
Schuler's
some really good
good.
players.
Yeah.
There. Yeah, they've got some very good defensive players, but it just doesn't look like it's just again, it's an explosive offensive team. I don't know. Like I think they are built differently, but about as good. So my guess is yes, they can probably do what they did last year. They'll just do it in a different way. I love the price love combination. It reminds me a little bit of what Ohio State had last year in Judkins and Henderson. Are they as good as Judkins and Henderson? Those guys were both drafted in the second round, if I remember correctly. It doesn't matter if they are as good as those two guys. The simple fact that we can have the conversation means that's pretty amazing. I was on a radio show last night, and the guy, a little bit more of an NFL guy who tends to bring things back to like, the draft discussions. And he mentioned like, boy, I didn't think we were going to have another running back like Bijan or Genti. And now I look at Love and he might be that good. And I didn't really necessarily think that Love is as good as Bijan, but now that you're talking me into it, Stu, yeah, I mean, and Bruce, so yeah, I think Notre Dame can get as far as it went last year. It will just do it in a different way, Stu.
I mean, yeah, they're flawed, but everybody else is flawed, and they've got these dynamic difference makers that can go off at any time. I think for you on the USC side of things, this had to feel like a Groundhog Day for USC fans because it just feels like when they get in these games, and especially on the road, they mess it up. They were actually playing well and they were in the game, and then it's like Lincoln Riley calls this bizarre trick play to have his best receiver try to throw the ball. As he's scrambling to his right, he fumbles. Notre Dame gets it. That was backbreaking. There was a 4th and inches where they ran a play action bootleg, didn't get it. Just kind of like puzzling moments like that. I didn't expect them to go to South Bend and win. Don't get me wrong. But it's the way they lose, where I feel like Lincoln Riley tries to get too cute and outsmarts themselves at times, Bruce.
You know what I didn't expect, guys? That I would get home from like 14 hours in the studio and feel like I need to stay up an extra hour and a half to make sure I watched
Florida State Stanford
against Stanford. At one point, I was like my contacts were like burning in my eyes, and I was like, I can't go to bed. I need to see this because, the juxtaposition from, I know we touched on this early about how impressive Florida State was in its opener against Alabama, to the wheels are off the wagon now. They've lost 4 in a row. They've lost, what are they, like 1-11? And I don't know what the awful stat is in ACC play, because they've
lost 9 straight ACC games.
They have talent. Like this team is like much more talented than the one last year. Put me in the Ralph. We talk buyouts. We talk all this stuff. Put me in the mind of if you're a Florida State fan, or even somebody in, Stu. I know you were out with some of the Florida State people in leadership the other day in the Bay Area, right? Because they were out there. Like, how do they? I don't want to say how they talk themselves into more patience, but it feels like the wheels are totally off that thing, Ralph. Like, I know we talked about, the situation with LSU and Brian Kelly, very different dynamics, but this is like the product on the field is way worse right now.
Yeah.
Where do you think it goes from here?
Yeah. It seems ridiculous to bring up, well, do they have the $60 million to get it? But when, again, like we're just all shrugging at that now and going like, well, they'll figure it out. A little bit of a difference here. ACC money is not SEC money, even though they've restructured some things in the ACC. ACC money is not SEC money, so I don't know if Florida State quite has the places to tap into if they were to really try to go big here. It's amazing. This guy was almost the Alabama coach, right? And I don't think Mike Norvell is that bad of a coach, but something is desperately broken there because, as you said, I understand that they might not be that good. They might not be the team that beat Alabama, but oh my Lord, how can you not be the team that is better than this Stanford team? Which, like, I don't even like. They're just piecing that thing together with like gum and scotch tape over there at the farm. So it is really baffling. You know, we've had a couple of comments about like, let's talk about Knowles and how freaking insane that it is that Norvell hadn't been fired yet. A little earlier on, we had Bruce, did FSU leave Mike Norvell at the airport? I don't think so. And again, like, I know we're trying to divorce the money conversation and say, well, the money doesn't matter anymore. You just get rid of the guy. That is a lot of money. And I do think where you are, if you're Florida State, is you're stunned that it got to this point, because there's no way you thought, oh, we might go 3-9, 4-8 again. We're at least going to get to 6, and 6 is a lot better than 2, which is what we had last year. So at that point, we can convince ourselves to keep them. But if you can't beat Stanford, then you might not be able to beat anybody. I think, though, where we probably are with this, Stu, is Florida State crossing its fingers, its leadership, and saying, please, God, please, Mike, fix this enough so that you can get us to 6 wins. And then we can justify getting you one more year here, and then we'll figure it out from there.
This was just, I realized they had already, they lost to Pitt the week before at home. I'm sure that was considered unacceptable, but this was a whole new level of unacceptable. And it really screws up their, whatever the plan might have been, because I don't think anybody was thinking they might miss a bowl game. And so does Florida State, Florida State expects to be better than 6-6, but after what happened last year, it's improvement, and it kind of calms the waters a little bit. You don't need to think about firing Mike Norvell yet. This puts it on the table, though. They got Wake Forest at home next week. They better win that. They're going at Clemson, Virginia Tech at home, at NC State, at Florida. They could definitely suffer a losing record, and if they do, that's where you find the $60 million somewhere, Ralph. And I agree with you. You're not. I mean, they did a whole lawsuit. Florida State went to court around the fact that, hey, we aren't making the kind of money they are in the Big Ten and SEC. We need to do something. They did get something done. They got this TV ratings thing, though. I don't know what the TV ratings were for a 10:30 p.m. Eastern game against Stanford. But yeah, so basically what I'm saying is, no, he's not getting left at the airport. I'm not shocked that he isn't already being fired, but it's putting that back on the table at a time when I think Michael Alford and Florida State brass figured they were past that for this year, right? I think we are going to do shout-outs, but I will just say really quick, speaking of train wrecks, guys, I got to see one in person the other night. I will say while I don't love, in theory, the idea of the ACC being a cross-country conference, it is working out well for me. So Friday night I went to UNC at Cal, right? Classic ACC football matchup that is. This was and lo and behold, UNC almost pulled it off. I mean, I don't know how many people were watching that game, but they lose 21-18, and they could have won. Unfortunately, their receiver fumbles right as he's about to score the go-ahead touchdown, and Cal recovers it for a touchback. So this is my first time. I've been watching Bill Belichick press conference clips on TV for 25 years. This is my first time actually being in the room. And it's a small room at the Cal, the Cal visiting. He's maybe 5-10 feet in front of him. I think TV doesn't do justice to watching his brain work. So people are mostly asking. The theme of the press conference with the coach and the players was basically this was a moral victory, right? Like, oh, I know you lost, but can you take pride or progress and da 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 da. And so every time somebody asks him a question, what I've noticed is he takes it very literally. He takes 2 or 3 seconds to think about his answer. And I don't get the sense he's like strategizing or scheming what he's going to say. He just says like what Bill Belichick's own natural reaction to be. So for instance, I look, it wasn't my finest delivery of a question, but I tried to ask basically, hey, you got blown out in the last 3 games. This time it went right down to the wire. I know you don't want to, losing's not good ever, but like, do you take some sense of confidence? And he just, 2, 3. Yeah, it is what it is. And I was like, I kind of took it as a career honor, right? To get an is what it is from Bill Belichick.
That is solid stuff. Yeah. I guess it's progress there. I guess it's progress. I am glad you got to experience that in person without question.
I don't know if it's progress or not because I don't think Cal's very good, and that's crazy to say because they're 5-2, but
they are the worst 5-2 team in the country.
Yeah, that's the thing. These big conferences, these ridiculously unbalanced schedules, you can get deceiving things like that. All right, our producer Ralph Russo decided we should combine shout-outs and players to watch into one category. Ralph, I give you the floor.
I love the fact that you bring our show meetings right to the live audience. So I think it was just as recently as 2 weeks ago, I shouted out Old Dominion, or got them into somewhere around this segment because they had done such a good job down there with Ricky Ronnie and Kevin Decker, the offensive coordinator, Colton Joseph, the quarterback. Well, yesterday, big game in the Sun Belt between ODU and JMU. It was 28-27 at the half. What a rollicking good time. And then JMU shut the water off. Scored 35 unanswered in the second half. Held ODU and a really good offense to 10 yards in the second half. They had 275 yards in the first half. They had 10 in the second half. If there is another team outside the American that deserves some consideration as we head down the stretch here for possibly getting a playoff spot out of the G5, it's James Madison out of the Sun Belt. I just keep an eye on them. They did a great job yesterday.
All right, my shout out is going to go to Alex Mortensen. He is the son of the late great Chris Mortensen, who was a colleague of mine and somebody I became pretty close to. And Alex is someone who, if you were been inside the Alabama program when Nick Saban's dynasty was really rolling, he was a critical piece of that. He was kind of the onboarding guy for all the coaches who came and went. And everybody I know there just used to rave about how sharp Alex is. So he had never left there, kind of hung tight, had opportunities to leave. Didn't leave until Trent Dilfer, who is very close to Mort, got the UAB job. Obviously, it did not go well for Trent Dilfer and the Blazers.
Shocked.
He got fired last week.
Just shocked that didn't work out.
Okay. Well, it didn't,
Go
obviously. Ahead. But he got fired last week, and then Alex Mortensen becomes the interim. And they were a 3-touchdown underdog against an undefeated top 25 Memphis team, and they went out and beat Memphis. And I think what was pretty amazing, now, first of all, Memphis has like maybe an 8-figure NIL roster, whereas UAB, from what I understand, has about a $2 million dollar NIL roster. And also, I think what's tricky in this situation is you have a guy who is an offensive coordinator, and he was working for Trent, who is an offensive guy and obviously has a very strong personality. And we'll see how the Blazers respond. I know from talking to somebody on their staff today, it was like they would love nothing more than if Alex Mortensen could lead them to a role and end up keeping the job.
That was a crazy upset. And, it's interesting, Ralph, that you mentioned James Madison as a maybe possibly group of 5, because, also yesterday, Boise State crushed UNLV, and I feel like kind of took the Mountain West off the table. So it's probably going to be the American champ, most likely. And obviously that was a setback for Memphis as one of those contenders. All right, you guys know I like to go really off the beaten path as much as I can in these shout outs, but this one might be the most off the beaten path I've done.
I love this.
Monty Quinn, running back for D3 Curry College, ran for 522 yards in a 71-27 win over Nichols College. This will not surprise you to learn that is the NCAA all-division rushing record. And frankly, I didn't even know how that's even possible to go for 522 rushing yards in a game. You may remember 2014-ish, 15 maybe, Samaje Perine ran for like a little over 400, and then Melvin Gordon did it like the next week, and it seemed 400 rushing yards seemed inconceivable. And here we've reached 522 rushing yards in one game. Way to go, Monty Quinn. So that brings us to the end of this episode. We will be back on Tuesday, where we will start to look ahead to next week's games. I also have a feeling we might have some coaching carousel stuff to discuss on Tuesday. We shall see. Remember, every episode of The Audible is now on YouTube at Audible Show, and this episode is live every Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. We will see you next time.